Good morning. Welcome to First Parish in Framingham. I'm Greg Wells, a member of the Board of Assessors, and I'll be your worship associate this morning. First Parish in Framingham is a welcoming congregation. We celebrate and recognize people and welcome people of all sexual orientations, races, ages, gender identities, abilities, and beliefs. We welcome you if you are joining us in the meeting house, on Zoom, or if you are watching this service after the fact. Whoever you are, whoever you love, wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Unitarian Universalism is a progressive, inclusive faith guided by moral principles such as the worth and dignity of all. We draw inspiration from the world religions and philosophies, science, history, and the arts. I draw your attention to the announcements in the order of service. Immediately following the service, you're invited to join us at coffee hour in Scott Hall across the courtyard. For the safety and comfort of all, please remember to keep your mask on at all times when you are inside a First Parish building, unless you are actively eating or drinking. Please also turn off your phones and other devices that might make noise to their lowest, quietest setting. Finally, I want to tell you something. Since 1701, people have gathered at this community seeking peace and seeking meaning. Those people are like you. You belong here. Maybe for the next hour, but we hope for longer. You belong here, and we are happy to have you with us. I now invite you to take a deep breath in and out. Continue to take a few more deep breaths over the next few moments. Begin to let go of what you need to let go of to be more fully present to yourself, one another, and the sacred in this time and place. A flame within the chalice is the primary symbol of Unitarian Universalist faith tradition. To symbolize the light of reason, the warmth of community, and the flame of hope, it is our tradition to begin our worship by kindling the flame in the chalice. I light our chalice with these words from Fantasia Brioche. As we light this flame of hope, may our congregation become a kaleidoscope of souls and people. In the presence of this flame, in me, in you, in us, is an invitation to sit at the table. May we tend our soul's fire through these challenging and trying times, to open the hearts and minds of all who enter our doors. Please rise in body and spirit to sing the hymn 995, There is More Love, and remain standing for us, sung affirmation and spoken affirmation. Love is the doctrine of the church. Quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, to serve all life with compassion, to the end that all souls shall grow divine. This is our great covenant, one with another and with our God. You may be seated.
Good morning. My name is Lauren Strauss. I use she, her pronouns. I am the Director of Religious Exploration here at First Parish, and I invite you to say with me, good morning and welcome to church. On December 13th, 2022, the NPR show Planet Money was recording an episode at an elementary school in Virginia. Planet Money is an economics show, and their goal was to demonstrate that it's possible to teach complex economic concepts to children using children's literature. I wish someone had taken this approach with me. So the teacher began to read to her third grade class. This is all being recorded. Now, the Starbelly Sneetches had bellies with stars. The Plain Belly Sneetches had none upon theirs. Those stars weren't so big. They were really so small, you might think such a thing wouldn't matter at all. But because they had stars, all the Starbelly Sneetches would brag, we're the best kind of sneetch on the beaches. With their snoots in the air, they would sniff and they'd snort. We'll have nothing to do with the plain belly sort. When the Starbelly Sneetches had Frankfurter roasts, or picnics, or parties, or marshmallow toasts, they never invited the Plain Belly Sneetches. They left them out cold in the dark of the beaches. They kept them away, never let them come near, and that's how they treated them year after year. And just about at this point, a boy named Noah raised his hand, according to a story that was printed in the Washington Post this past week. It's almost like what happened back then, how people were treated, Noah said, his classmates audibly agreeing, like disrespected, like white people disrespected black people. But then they might stand up in the book. And just a few minutes later, the principal of the school stopped the recording. I wonder what was going on there. The story is The Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. It's actually chock full of economic concepts like supply and demand. But first and foremost, its message is that when we create barriers for people because they look different, it's inherently unjust. I have a dream, said Dr. King, that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. He gave that speech in 1963, 60 years ago. Some of the people here in this room may have even seen that speech. People alive at that time have seen the world change radically with laws that say treating people differently due to the color of their skin or their gender, sexual preference, disability, or religion is illegal and immoral. So what does it mean that a 9-year-old bringing up race in a lesson on economics gets shut down, gets the whole lesson shut down 60 years after Dr. King's speech that every single American can recite at least a small part of? Can't we all hear his voice in our heads shouting, "I have a dream"? I know I can, and it's been there in my head since before I was old, since I was younger than Noah, the 3rd grader. What has happened to Dr. King's dream if we can't even talk about race in our schools? If we can't notice wrongs and try to right them? If we won't look inward and figure out where we're still in need of growing and learning and changing? 60 years is a long time for people to be waiting to be truly enfranchised in our society instead of hoping for more fairness or a seat at that welcome table we talk about. When Sylvester McMonkey McBean arrives on the beaches and puts stars on the bellies of the plain belly sneetches, the original star belly sneetches get him to take theirs off. And he spends the whole day putting stars on and taking stars off of sneetches. As he drives off with all their money, he laughs, "They never will learn. No, you can't teach a sneetch." But the sneetches do learn. They realize that no kind of sneetch is better or worse than any other, and it doesn't matter who has stars upon theirs. So, fellow humans, what will it take for us to learn like the sneetches? And now the children and teachers, and by the way, I could use a teacher this morning if you've got a minute, and youth and whoever else will follow me out while y'all sing us to religious exploration.
In our community, there is great joy and there is also great sorrow. We set aside this time because we know that joy shared is joy expanded, and sorrow shared can feel as though someone is lifting a burden. You can write down your joys or sorrows before the service in the book at the back of the sanctuary, or you can submit those online. We send a link out usually every Thursday, unless I forget. We begin with these sorrows, this from Carol, who writes that she is thinking of the family of Harry Meserve, my department head for many years. Harry passed away before Christmas. I share this sorrow on behalf of Lizzie and myself. We just want to thank everyone for your very kind expressions of grief after the death of Lizzie's grandmother 3 days after Christmas. It doesn't make the grief easier, but it does make the grief a little less lonely. Let us now sing the first verse of Comfort Me. Comfort me. I share this joy from Jane, who wrote when she submitted this, "I am seeing my youngest grandchildren today after not seeing them for a year." Let's sing the second verse of Comfort Me. Sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. Sing with me, sing with me, sing with me, oh my soul. And we light one final candle for all of the joys and the sorrows that remain unshared, the joys and the sorrows too great to share. And we'll sing the final verse, or verse 3 rather, of Comfort Me. Speak for me, oh my soul. Speak for me, speak for me, speak for me, oh my soul. Let us now move a little bit deeper into a space for contemplation, meditation, and prayer, focusing on our breath in and our breath out, feeling whatever is beneath us, supporting us, and sensing our connection to the ground and the earth beneath us. The earth which has supported humanity since before we can even imagine. O Spirit of life and love, named and unnamed, but who calls us each by our true first name, which is beloved. There is much to be thankful for. The sound of singing, the sight of people that we haven't seen in a while, the embrace of this community. We also know that in our midst there is sorrow. May we lend a helping hand and a listening ear to all who are struggling, all who are ill, all who are lonely, all those who live with addiction, all those who mourn. In this moment, I recall all of those working on our front lines in healthcare, all those essential workers. This pandemic is still not over. People still ill. I also ask for strength for all of us and all those who work to bend the arc of the universe towards justice. Words that Dr. Martin Luther King said. We know that it takes a long time to bend that arc. No one person can do it alone. We must all work together to be love's hands in public. That is what justice looks like. Let us also work to bring peace to all of the war-torn parts of our world, whether just down the street or abroad. And we know that from time to time we are weary. We say things that we didn't mean to say. We put up barriers between others and our best selves. We know that we fumble and fail. But we are also people of integrity and commitment. Because we are still breathing, there is still time to move into right relationship, still time to say, I'm sorry, how can I do better? And still time to act. I say these words and do all things for love's sake. Let us now sit in the quiet of this old house so that we might rest or listen or pray the prayers of our own hearts. We will sit for a minute and I will keep track of the time. May it be so, and amen.
We have been richly blessed. We return a portion of our blessing to the ministry of this congregation so that we might be witness to the free faith in Framingham and in Metro West. If this is your first time joining us, you're invited to let the offering plate pass you by. This morning's offering will now be joyfully given and gratefully received.
Our reading today is two selections from the work of Howard Thurman and Martin Luther King Jr. Our first is from Thurman. This is an excerpt from a sermon he delivered. We'll get into the date and place of that in the sermon. He wrote, "Every person has two views of themselves, at least two views. There is a self-image, and the self-image is made up of several things. Sometimes it is what I think other people think of me. Sometimes it is what I want other people to think of me. Sometimes it is what I think I ought to think of me. And sometimes it is what I think of me. One of these, two of these, three of these, several thrown into a kind of creative wholeness. This creates the self-image. And I carry it around with me. I can't locate its origin altogether at this point or that point, but I know that it is very real to me, and it is a part of what I call myself. Now, there is still another dimension of this, and this has to do with the facts concerning me. It has to do with what, in the light of my things, the raw materials of experience of me, my awareness of my fact, of the details of my fact, my consciousness of that which is literally true of me, literally factually. And very often there is a gulf, a hiatus between this image and this body of fact. Now, it seems to me that integrity is the experience that a person has when the image and the fact flow together as one creative synthesis and wholeness inside the human. When I am unanimous with reference to the view and the clue, the view being the image and the clue being the stuff of every day that I know the details about, what I am and what I do. Now, the quest for integrity is the quest on the part of the human spirit to arrive at the kind of inner unanimity that enables the human spirit to take a stand, which is as complete and as whole within as it is substantial and positive in its outward manifestation. Now, one of the forms that this takes then is the necessity for trying to find something outside of yourself that is capable of making possible your response to it in terms of wholeness and inner unity, something that calls you to an inner, total, integrated, and whole registration. And now this from Martin Luther King Jr. We so often ask, what will happen to my job, my prestige, my status, if I take a stand on this issue? Will my house be bombed? Will my life be threatened, or will I be jailed? The good person always reverses the question. Albert Schweitzer did not ask, what will happen to my prestige and my security as a university professor and to my status as a Bach organist if I work with the people of Africa? But rather he asked, what will happen to these millions of people who have been wounded by the forces of injustice if I do not go to them? Abraham Lincoln did not ask, what will happen to me if I issue the Emancipation Proclamation and bring to end chattel slavery? But he asked, what will happen to the Union and to millions of Negro people if I fail to do it? The Negro professional does not ask, what will happen to my secure position, my middle-class status, or my personal safety if I participate in the movement to end the system of segregation? But what will happen to the cause of justice and the masses of Negro people who have never experienced the warmth of economic security if I do not participate actively and courageously in the movement? The ultimate measure of a person is not where they side in the moments of comfort and convenience, but where they side at times of challenge and controversy. The true neighbor will risk their position, their prestige, and even their life for the welfare of others. In dangerous valleys and hazardous pathways, they will lift some bruised and beaten sibling to a higher and more noble life. Here ends our readings for today. The question that I am left with as I hear Martin Luther King's words, as I read them, is, are we doing enough? Are you doing enough? Am I doing enough? I could conjugate that question further, but you get the picture. I often wonder if we are doing enough, if we are moved enough to act in ways that bring more justice to our world. If we are called to live lives that work to rip apart the chains of oppression. If we are ill with the thought of what comes next if X, Y, or Z doesn't happen. If we are moved by the fact that we do not live in a just and equitable society, when will we live into our mission of building the beloved community and working to love the hell out of this world? When will we move to action? Why don't we move to action? I think some of the why not rests in feeling like the task of working to rebuild this beautiful and broken world is too enormous, the journey too unknown and arduous, and the process too murky. It's not one task, one thing that needs to happen. It is a bunch of them. I also think some of the reasons why people do not act also rests in the place of not knowing what we can do. We feel that we do not have the skill set necessary to bring justice. We feel as though the movements afoot need prophets, and we feel very certain that we are not a prophet or an activist or a speaker or a protester. I don't think that those involved in the fight for their human rights did either. They did it just because they were tired of oppression. They could not live another day with doing nothing. How do you act with integrity to bring more justice into the world, knowing our true dispositions and personalities? Well, for starters, there will be times when we are called to be something more than ourselves, when we are called to grow for the good of this project. But there are places for all of us in the task of being love's hands in the world, because this task is complex and requires people from all different walks of life to do what they can. I want to explore this morning what some figures of the civil rights movement said about integrity, and explore what their place in the movement is, and how their personality archetypes are beneficial and useful, in the hopes that you might see yourself somewhere in the array of personalities. Of course, there are so many other people whose names we know, who furthered the cause of wholeness and justice for all. And there are so many people whose names we do not know, who also furthered the cause of justice. Now, I'll acknowledge that in the readings that we heard this morning, we only heard from two men. I could make excuses, but I want to lift up some names of women who did civil rights work and the method by which they did their work. Ella Baker served as a mentor to people like Thurgood Marshall, King, and Rosa Parks. Daisy Bates, who was a newspaper publisher who helped enroll the Little Rock Nine. Fannie Lou Hamer, a political activist who fought for the African American right to vote. Dorothy Height, a key organizer in the 1963 March on Washington. Diane Nash, who founded the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, and Septima Poisonette Clark, a teacher who started citizenship schools which taught the literacy necessary to get many African Americans registered to vote, and Joanne Robinson, who distributed over 50,000 flyers about the Montgomery bus boycott. So these three different archetypes of people, we know that labels can be useful, but they also obscure. They tell what is on the inside while also masking the insides. When I think social justice workers, I often forget the mystics, which is too bad. Howard Thurman, I think, we would identify him as a mystic. And in most of our Unitarian Universalist congregations, and I think especially in ours, we only hear his work on Christmas Eve, which is a shame. That piece that begins after the song of the angels is stilled, then the work of Christmas begins. It is beautiful, but there is more to know about Thurman. This man is outstanding. Thurman was the grandson of a slave. He grew up in Daytona Beach, Florida, and went to a Baptist academy for high school, then went to Morehouse College. And from there, seeking to answer a call to ministry, he went to Rochester Theological Seminary. He was ordained the year before he graduated. And it was always a point of sadness at Andover Newton, where I went to seminary, that Newton Theological Institute actually denied him admission based on his race. We taught his work a little bit more frequently, I think, because of that. The reading we heard of Thurman was delivered when he was the dean of Marsh Chapel at Boston University. He speaks about integrity being the full picture that we get when all of the aspects of our self-image and the things that are true are registered just right. Then the full image is revealed. Like when I first read this, I didn't understand what he meant, and then I got into printing with different colors and learned that if things aren't lined up exactly right, the picture looks out of sort. But when things are all lined up perfectly, you get this beautiful picture of who you are. I am not sure if Thurman described himself as a mystic, but he fits all the characteristics. I think what we mean when we say mystic is an experience of unity with the divine, and mystical social justice liberation theology would say that the experiences of unity among people are more important than the experiences that divide us. His book, Jesus and the Disinherited, was one of the first Black liberation theology books. Thurman also was important because he met with Gandhi and brought this concept of nonviolent action to the awareness of civil rights leaders in the United States. That book preached the nonviolent way of being and was something that Martin Luther King Jr. carried on his person. Thurman believed this about the intersections of mysticism and social action. For the mystic, social action is sacramental because it is not an end in itself. Always it is the individual who must be addressed, located, and released underneath his misery and his hunger and his destitution. That whatever may be blocking his way to his own center where his altar may be found, that must be removed. From Thurman, we move to talk about Martin Luther King Jr. I would classify Martin Luther King Jr. as a prophet. And this might be one of the archetypes that frightens us, because I know that for many of us, religious language leaves a bad taste in our mouth. It is one of the sources of our religious tradition, the words and deeds of prophetic people, which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Now, the years of Martin Luther King's doctoral studies at Boston University line up with Thurman's tenure as well at Boston University. So King would often attend his chapel services, but the connection and mentorship goes deeper than that. Thurman was a classmate of King's father in seminary, and during the last years of King's PhD studies, they would watch baseball together, which owed to be a fly on the wall of that living room while King and Thurman watched baseball. In Thurman's autobiography, he records only one serious meeting between King and himself. It was right after King had been stabbed at a book signing, and Thurman asked King, "How long do you have for recovery?" And King responded with some answer that was very short. And Thurman urged King, "Take 2 weeks more than whatever the doctors tell you. Take that time in isolation to recharge and heal and evaluate what you are doing." It's clear that King wove certain themes throughout sermons through his career. This sermon that I quoted from earlier was published in the 1963 book, Strength to Love, but there are echoes of it throughout many sermons through his preaching career. In this sermon, he explores the parable of the Good Samaritan. In the section that I read from, we hear that the Good Samaritan exemplified a sort of dangerous altruism, risking his life to save a brother. He writes, "The ultimate measure of a man is not where he stands in moments of comfort and convenience, but where he stands at moments of challenge and controversy." This also reminds me of the letter from the Birmingham City Jail, written to white moderate clergymen in the city, who were themselves decrying the method of protesting. King rightfully calls them out, asking, "Why do you deplore the methods, but not the reasons and conditions which made it necessary for us to protest?" King was a prophet. There's a certain kind of prophecy, though, that we each would do well to embrace, which is the prophethood of all believers. I've said this many times. We each know when things in the world are not right, when it seems like the world just isn't right. James Luther Adams, a Unitarian theologian of blessed memory, calls us into this prophethood of all believers when we speak through the signs of the times to speak truth for power. It isn't about seeing the future, it's about seeing through. And now I move on to the final archetype, the activist. I would lift up Bayard Rustin as an activist this morning. We didn't have time this morning to hear his words, though we might have. I draw on the forward of a collection of his letters written by Michael Long. He's known by most people for his role as the logistical mastermind behind the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom in August of '63. But we lack familiarity with this man because of simply who he was. He was a gay man, a Quaker, and a socialist connected to the Communist Party. Because of this, he either opted to keep himself in the shadows or was forced into the shadows by other civil rights leaders. And because of that, or in addition to that, he was never associated with some of the traditional power groups, the Black Church, the NAACP, or Congress, which meant he never had a group of people seeking him as their leader. Long, the editor of this collection of Bayard Rustin's letters, titled "I Must Resist," again cautions us to resist this man, to reduce this man to mere administrator and event planner. Long writes, Bayard Rustin is one of the most important figures in nonviolent protest politics in the 20th century. If he found an attitude or action unjust and oppressive, any action or attitude, not just those related to race and ethnicity, he would more than likely seek nonviolently to tame it, transform it, or destroy it, no matter how legal, customary, or religious it appeared to be. It was his nature to do so, and perhaps it was unavoidable that he turned out this way. He was born in 1912 and raised mainly by his maternal grandmother, Julia, who was educated in a school run by the Religious Society of Friends that influenced him greatly. Over the years, he led many direct actions. Long explains the time-honored and moderate methods favored by his elders, educating the public and filing lawsuits, did not satisfy his desire for immediate action and results. The young activist would eventually plan and lead direct acts of resistance against racial injustices. So, my friends gathered here, I lift up these ways of being, these archetypes, because so often we do not know where we fit in this work to bring more justice to the world. One of the things that I have learned is the necessity to know how you move through the world, to find the places where your natural disposition meets with what the world needs, and to go and be like that. Are you a healer, a listener, an activist, a speaker, an administrator, a tinkerer, a singer, a poet, a cook, a driver, a dispatcher? What's the image you use to describe what you do? That is what the world needs. People who know themselves and go and be the best darn bottle washer in all of the land. There's a place for everyone in this task of rebuilding the beautiful and broken world, and there will be moments where you must also act extraordinarily, where we must rise above our roles and stations in life. We may be called to act in ways unknown to us, ways that will stretch and scare us. We must find ways to act nonetheless. The goal of creation of the beloved community isn't about creating a community that you love a lot. It is about creating a community that subverts this dominant paradigm. It is about creating a community where there is no us and them, but only we. And that work is about creating something new. May it be so. Let us now rise in body or spirit to sing our closing hymn, number 121, We'll Build a Land.
All
close with these words of benediction titled Clearing by Martha Postlewaite. Do not try to serve the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is yours alone to sing falls into your open cupped hands and you recognize it and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to the world so worthy of rescue. Go in peace.